You seemed
to be back.
It is such a pleasure to have you back on the programme. I want to ask you for your reflections on your own famous Gaia hypothesis, that idea that all of life on this planet and the planet itself are part of one self-regulating system. When you developed the idea 5 decades ago, you seemed quite optimistic that this system was very durable, very resilient.
Well, it had lasted 3 billion years. That's not bad going.
But are you now worried about its vulnerability?
Yes, I am. You see, I see Gaia, the system of the Earth, as about the same age as me, in effect. I don't mean it's 102 coming up. What I mean is it's equivalent to that in the planet's terms. Its time is approaching.
You're saying that our planet and all of life on this planet is in its last phase?
Yep. Unless we do things to stop that happening, or us, those that follow us do it. It could be rescued to an extent.
What would we all, as a species, the human species, what would we all need to do now to avert that sort of, frankly, end-of-life scenario that you're talking about?
I think the first thing is to understand what's happening. You can't really do much if everybody's arguing about it, which they have been.
But what happens, Phil, for our children and their children? No numbers, just the consequences.
Well, by 2100, Dust Bowl conditions across North America and Africa, Asia too. Sooner than that, a massive reduction in agricultural production, access to drinking water, migration in huge numbers, and bushfires on a massive scale in Australia, the west coast. And melting at the poles, the West Antarctic ice sheet. Well, because of that, the global sea level rise of, well, meters.
But what does that all mean for us? People. Make me see it, Phil.
Well, in this worst case scenario, 70% of the habitable world will no longer be able to sustain human life. Millions of species will become extinct. And coastal and delta cities will be underwater. And, well, if the methane in the permafrost and on the seabed is released, well...
Yes?
The climate will collapse. And the world, as we know it, will be gone.
Now, we know there are some people...
We can look toward the future, and these are the projections from climate models. And a lot of people may question them, but climate models are bloody good at getting global average temperature. In fact, they're spot on, because we understand the physics of the climate system really, really well. Where are we going now? We're going on the orange one. And that's going toward a 4-degree temperature rise by the end of this century compared to pre-industrial. Any idea what the temperature difference is between the last ice age and the present? Any guesses? 4 degrees. So we're talking about a shift as big as between an ice age when mastodons and woolly mammoths were around and humans barely survived. We're talking about the same difference. but not in 5,000 years, in 1 century. So let me put that change on the same time frame that I just showed you. There's our 2,000-year history where we developed our cities, modern civilization. There's the spike at the end where we are now. And there's the projections on the same time frame at 2100. Okay? The problem there is that, in my view, it is impossible to survive that sort of change. That's beyond human physiology to deal with that sort of change. In fact, large mammals as a whole will not be very good in there. Our cities are designed for that wavy black line. And remember, a lot of our infrastructure is designed for 100 years. That is 100 years. In fact, that 5 to 6 degrees is business as usual 85 years from now, a human lifetime. So let me just leave you then with a couple of numbers here. That's what we're committed to, by the way. Even with the fastest rollout we can of solar, of non-carbon transport, of different agriculture, we're committed to pretty much 2 degrees. We're not going to make the Paris 1.5. That's already out of the question. And that's already a big shock. But that is where the trajectory we're on now. And that's a collapse scenario, no matter what we do with all the whiz-bang technology, because physiologically we can't survive that. So the real challenge is we've got to make sure we hit that 2 degrees.
If we carry on the way we're going, I can't see this civilization lasting the end of this century. No chance, in my view, on the current trajectory.
If we get it wrong, so if we do the wrong things, then I think there's a very, very big risk that we will just end our civilization. The human species will survive somehow, but we will destroy almost everything we built up over the last 2,000 years. I'm pretty sure.
It's just so, the path we're on is just so dark. It's so bleak. You know, I see tropics that's uninhabitable by humans because it's too hot. It's too humid and hot that our bodies couldn't even survive there. And I see, potentially hundreds of millions of people needing to leave that region and go to cooler areas. And that's just the beginning.
We are, without exaggeration, facing a trajectory and impacts that will obliterate the possibility of human civilization within, by the year 2100. And that is not an exaggeration. And the fact that that is not widely known, that the stakes are so extraordinarily high, I think is something that really should cause a lot of people to, from media to scientists to hang their heads in real shame and real horror.
Recent history supports the view from the IEA, the International Energy Agency, that the CO2 trend is perfectly in line with a temperature increase of 6 degrees Celsius, which would have devastating consequences for the planet.
These tipping points have the possibility. They certainly put forward the risk of a cascade that could take the climate, the Earth system, out of our control into conditions that would be an existential threat to us. Well, if that isn't a emergency situation, I don't know what is.
Everybody on the planet now needs to be galvanized to tackling climate change because it is by far the most important and biggest emergency that mankind has ever faced.